Hello, everyone. You are tuning in to Grit and Glamour, an interview series featuring honest conversations with fashion changemakers to share both the grit and glamour of what it really takes to lead and succeed. I'm your host, Ruby Veridiano, and welcome to another episode of Grit and Glamour. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode and a new season of Grit and Glamour. Grit and Glamour is an interview series featuring honest conversations with fashion changemakers about all the grit behind the glamour of what it really takes to lead and succeed in this space. I'm your host, Ruby Veridiano, and today I have a special guest, Susannah Jaffer of Zerrin. Zerrin is a sustainable fashion platform and marketplace based in Singapore, and in today's conversation, we are going to be talking about how to build a conscious wardrobe and why Southeast Asia as a region should prioritize sustainability. So, Susannah, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Singapore. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thanks, Ruby. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How's the weather where you're at?
We just had a storm, so that's why it's a little bit dark in my flat. Normally I would have natural light, but I've got a bit of artificial light going on. So rainy Saturday afternoon.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And I'd love to just go ahead and get right into it because I'm so excited to share your story and the work that you're doing. So tell us a little bit more about Zerrin, what your mission is and how you serve your community out here in Singapore and also around the region.
Sure. So Zerrin was founded 2.5 years ago nearly now, end of 2017, beginning 2018. And basically, we are a multi-concept company, a media platform and online store. Our mission is to be a resource and guide for women that want to build a more mindful wardrobe. So yes, on the one hand, we curate a store full of ethical brands, fashion, jewelry, skincare, and we work really, really closely with our labels in terms of relationship and helping to empower their companies in other ways. And on the other hand, we share resources, guides, opinion pieces, articles, all revolving around the sustainable fashion space. Yeah.
Fantastic. Now, we are now living in a post-COVID world, and I think a lot of people are becoming more and more aware that sustainability needs to be a priority. You live in Southeast Asia. Now, for the region in particular, why do you think that the region should take this seriously, and how can we make people realize that their participation in the sustainability movement is urgent and critical for our time?
I think on the one hand, here in Southeast Asia, we are very close to a lot of countries in which there's environmental and human rights issues, especially in relation to fashion. So, for example, China, you can talk about, river pollution, you can talk about Bangladesh and social exploitation of workers. I mean, you only need to kind of look up during COVID-19. They had Remake Our World, the social advocacy platform. They had the Pay Up campaign because a lot of brands weren't paying their workers for orders that they'd already placed. Yeah. So there were a lot of garment workers in factories suffering, and all of them are based in, largely around this region. And the fact that, living in Singapore the last 8 years, which is a very, I would say, in comparison, a very economically developed and privileged country, I think that it's strange to not be aware of these things that are happening just an hour, 2 hour, 3 hours away from us.
Yeah.
And as a country as well, we rely so heavily on, outside resources as well, from food to fashion to everything in between. Everything here is really imported. Yeah. I just feel like I'd love people to see that sense of connection that they have to this whole supply chain. If we're talking specifically about fashion, where our clothes are coming from, and the after effects of that. And I just feel like Singapore is in a very kind of privileged position to take that on board. I guess you can learn more. I guess that's what we're trying to do here through our content, through the curation of brands and kind of telling their stories, which are in essence, often founded and built to support and empower communities or solve certain social and environmental issues or minimize their impact, etc. So.
Absolutely. And as you said, a lot of the factories and the social and environmental impact of the fashion industry is largely based in the Southeast Asian region. And I remember speaking to someone in Singapore 2 years ago when I was visiting, a gentleman named Ray Padit, who I believe you know, and he was saying that actually in Southeast Asia, whenever a natural disaster hits, it hits Southeast Asia first. And so it really needs to be a priority, and people need to really participate in this kind of urgent move towards a more sustainable environmental and social movement, just because, like whenever a disaster comes, because everything is centered or based there, you get hit, the region gets hit much more with much more impact. So that's a really good point to make. Now, one of the ways that I know that you champion people being able to participate in sustainability is through conscious consumerism. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it means to be a conscious consumer and what people can do? Like, what are the 3 to 5 steps that people can take to not only build a conscious wardrobe, but to just practice this in their daily life?
Okay. So conscious consumerism is a bit like sustainability. I think it's become a bit of a loaded term. I think it's been adapted and can mean different things to different people. I see it from a very simple standpoint of being more thoughtful about where things come from. And that just starts with sort of engaging brain before you actually are making a purchase. I think the fashion industry is notorious for actually disempowering women. And I'm not just talking, there's that whole scale disempowering women in the West in terms of, making us feel less than and making us feel like we need to purchase and buy to make up for some sort of lack that we have. That's also trailing into the, big marketing, big advertising. There's also, supply chain, 80% of garment workers are women. And so there's that whole standpoint, that value standpoint, which I came from to start my conscious consumerism journey. I think it's just really, finding, doing more research about where the things that you're bringing into your life come from. And I think that you can start that journey from multiple different standpoints. Probably the easiest thing is to, if you're going to spend your hard-earned money on something, is to, research, Google the brand, find out more about, what materials they're actually using, or where things are made in what country. Often, I did a really, really interesting talk about this with some kids in an international school. And this was such a basic level, but it was really impactful. Just got them to Google their favorite brands and look up their policy pages and find out, what they could and couldn't find, what details they were divulging or not. And that was really interesting. And then I kind of got them to write in groups what they would ask the brands now, given what they know or don't know. And I think that's how we can all go about it. Like, we all have our phones, like super quick access to info. Googling and finding out more about a brand before you purchase. Sort of identifying what values matter to you, whether that's, I came from a standpoint of caring about, female empowerment and women's education, and, really thinking that I wanted to support brands that valued that too. So that's where I started my research. Perhaps you are passionate about the environment or going plastic free. Maybe then you want to look to find brands that are supporting that way. There's also a number of ways you can engage in sustainable fashion. That doesn't just mean purchasing ethical brands. So it could mean that you could go through a secondhand avenue, or you could look at somewhere like Ray Padgett's The Fashion Pulpit, which is a clothes swap store. So there's so many different ways that you can consume more mindfully. But I think that it really starts internally and with a mindset engage and shift into how you view your relationship with your clothes. And that's a work in progress. I like to think that it's about progress, not perfection. It's kind of like training yourself into a new habit. But I think it's a really rewarding habit in the end, both for your wardrobe and your wallet.
Yes. And speaking of habits, I do try and stress to people that sustainability isn't just about the notion of consuming. It's really just about, as you said, healthy habits, taking care of your clothes, washing them in a way that doesn't damage them, mending them instead. Like, there's so many people that I know who will throw away or discard something just because it's got a little hole in it, or it's got a little stain in it. And you can actually figure out a way to to remedy that without having to get rid of it. So healthy habits is definitely a good way to get people involved. However, I do know that there's been a lot of pushback. Whenever I talk to people about sustainable fashion, it's a lot of pushback because it's very hard to let go of, the $5 t-shirts or, the very cheap deals that you can get because people are so rewarded when they get, when they buy like 10 things and it costs them under X amount of dollars. I'd say people they love the steals or the hauls. And I also feel that there's been some pushback around the idea that perhaps sustainable fashion is an elitist concept because of the higher price tag. So I have a couple of layers to this this part of the conversation. But first of all, can you help explain why sustainable fashion brands often have a higher price point?
Okay. So it's an interesting one because I guess what sustainable fashion brands or any sustainable brand is really trying to do is kind of bring what another big word in this whole industry is coming through is transparency. So they're trying to bring transparency into the equation and be considerate about how things are made, both socially and environmentally. So that means that could mean a number of things. It could mean using materials that are more eco-friendly. They tend to have a higher price tag. The reason why fast fashion brands use largely synthetic fabrics is because it's just cheaper. The majority of synthetic fabrics that we're wearing, polyester, nylon, acrylic, that you'll see in Forever 21, Zara, all of the big brands are plastic-based. So you're essentially wearing plastic in essence. So just as plastic bottles are cheap and can throw away, fast fashion has become, we've been able to purchase something, for $10 to $20 and then kind of not get that bothered if, like you say, it gets a hole in it, or, we can just throw it to the back of our wardrobes or even throw it away. So there's that on the one hand. Sustainable brands are using more expensive materials generally to produce, therefore the price point is higher. The next thing is the social aspect. So fast fashion brands, again, they tend to, like the biggest fast fashion brands that we know, you can label H&M, Topshop, all of these companies, they have operated on the basis of producing the cheapest quality garment at the cheapest price for both them and the consumer. Them as a business and consumer, us. So what that means is they're driving prices down right at the bottom of the supply chain. That means with the manufacturers, the factories. And more often than not, and this is not a blanket all case. I'm not saying that all fast fashion brands produce in sweatshops, because that's also not true. It's quite easy to kind of blanket the whole industry in that respect. But it has been proven that a lot of fast fashion brands do they're not monitoring their factories. There's a lot of labor rights infringements. Their workers aren't getting paid a living wage, let alone a minimum wage. So there's a difference between the two. Minimum wage is decided by the government, which is often decided in countries like Bangladesh. Politically, it's actually decided to be much lower just so that they can attract in this foreign investment in business, because companies can actually get away with paying that low, and the living wage, which is actually what it costs to survive. So they're not necessarily getting any of that. The difference is then with a slow fashion or a sustainable fashion brand is that they are actually actively, or at least the ones that I'm working with, and many of the ones that I know internationally, are trying to pay, or not trying, they are paying higher wages to their workers so that they are getting above or matching at least the living wage in their respective countries. So what that means is when you take into account these different factors, you might also take into account more eco-friendly packaging. You might also take into account a number of other factors that then raise the price point. All of these, again, are kind of hidden to the consumer because what you might see is a beautiful end product. But then I don't know, if you're not in the industry, it's quite difficult. I mean, I'm trying to step back as someone myself and put myself in the shoes of someone who may not know anything that I know, having worked in this industry. It must be hard to differentiate, then why should I pay more for this when this is this price?
Well, and the trouble, I think, too, is that fast fashion has trained the consumer to have a different expectation when it comes to price, right?
Totally.
And consumers don't realize, it's like, oh, I'm so used to getting this for, $5 or whatever it costs with the currency exchange. But if it costs less than a cup of coffee, somebody has paid for it through, a lack of decent wages, right? Yeah. So I think that's another reason why. And people don't understand all of the inner workings that it takes to actually get the product from concept to the consumer.
For sure. And the reason why that is, I also think, is because, we've grown up exposed to marketing, like from food to fashion. You grow up with, knowing what brands are. It's kind of inbuilt into your identity. So to the point that as a former fast fashion consumer, I know my size in Zara, Topshop, H&M. Like I can walk in, I know I'm an S, I know I'm an M, I know I'm this and that. It's like it's ingrained in your soul. Whereas when you are, looking at a newer sustainable label or any new independent label that is kind of not a big international brand name, there's that element of, so there's that another barrier to entry before you even get to price, I think is about, getting used to that trust and, just knowing more about a label. And I think that's not just a sustainable fashion problem, that's a general issue for a lot of independent brands that are kind of up and coming and trying to prove themselves in terms of quality and craftsmanship against sort of this whole fast fashion model. So it's a struggle in that way as well.
Yeah, but essentially they do cost more because, as you said, they use better materials, they're sourcing responsibly, they're paying their workers a living wage. And on top of all of that, it is generally higher quality materials because a lot of times they're involving artisans who are actual experts in their craft. So it's not like cheap stitching that's going to fall apart. It's actually something that's going to last forever and that you want to pass on to further generations. So wonderful. For those who are tuning in who want to build a conscious wardrobe, do they have to go and throw out everything that's H&M and Zara and Mango? Like, what do they do?
No, totally not. I mean, I operate on the very simple rule of buy or keep only what you love. I've made it a rule for myself that whether it's from a sustainable brand or, any brand, anything, if it was a piece of furniture, I don't buy anything on a whim anymore. Like I'll save it in my phone. I'll save it in my favorites album on my phone. I'll have a think about it. If I'm still like thinking about that dress or thinking about that, you know, table or thinking about anything for like a week, 2 weeks, then I'm like, okay, maybe I do really like this. Because often a lot of our purchases, or if I think back in my 20s, a lot of my purchases, my early 20s and my teens, late teens, were like impulse purchases. You know, I wanted to look good for that night out, or I wanted to try a trend that, you know, all my friends were wearing. And a lot of things I bought and I didn't think about it. And I would never wear that crazy sequin dress like again, or I'd never wear this again. And think before you buy, give yourself a bit of a time frame. That's one thing for anything new you're bringing into your life, your wardrobe. If you currently own like a plethora of fast fashion brands and you want to, start this whole more mindful consumption journey, I would, not throw everything out. I would have a good look at everything you have, and I would have a bit of a try-on session, to be honest, and actually go through, even though it's a bit annoying, I'd get it all out on your bed and I'd actually go through, try everything on and figure out like what it is, the pieces that you love. Because I think generally most women, we gravitate back to like a capsule of pieces that we rotate and love. Like you love this shirt, I love this dress, and you just continually find, I find that I wanted to wear the same pieces. I go back through the wardrobe and find the things that you like, the silhouettes, and make a note of it and figure out, okay, what is it I actually like about this piece? And maybe you figure out, wow, I love trapeze dresses. I love this. I love that. You find out what makes you feel amazing, because ultimately fashion is, a means of creative expression, and it's a way of making us, it has such power to make us feel strong, feel confident, feel, armored, feel through whatever situations we might be going through. So I think finding what you love within your current wardrobe, perhaps you could find a responsible way of, if you wanted to do a clear out, getting clear of the rest of it. But I think that by no means do you need to start by throwing out all of your fast fashion pieces.
Right. And that would just make more waste. So that would be environmentally friendly. Sure. Yeah. And one thing that I share with people a lot is the question, like, can you commit whenever you're buying something new, can you commit to wearing it at least 30 times? That's been really helpful, a helpful filter, because at least you know that you're not gonna get rid of it in the next year or so. So that's another thing that I like to tell people. Now, you are a small, medium enterprise, as I understand. And I know that there's a lot of small and medium brands who are in a bit of a precarious situation because of COVID. A lot of things that have stalled, or a lot of things that you have to pivot around because things have changed. The show is Grit and Glamour. I was wondering if you would be open to sharing a little bit of the grit behind the glamour of the work that you do, and share like some of the challenges that you might be facing as a startup founder yourself, and what lessons or wisdom you might be able to share with other folks who are in a similar situation as you.
Sure. So for myself, I was running Zerrin by myself for basically 2 years. A lot of people think because we're a multi-label platform, there's a lot of content that we push out that we have a team. We don't. For a long time, it was just me. I'm very privileged to be working with a lot of amazing retailers and brands as almost like a support network, though. So it hasn't always felt that I'm on my own, as it were. So that was a struggle for me for a while before COVID. I've had someone lovely join my team throughout the COVID period, so that I've really been able to do more, and that's been amazing. I'm really blessed. But there's still challenges. I think all of the businesses that I'm working with, they've all, myself included, had struggles in terms of, up and down with retail sales, figuring out, trying to adjust in terms of the lockdown and, what we could and couldn't do. On my side with Zerrin, we actually have a creative agency side called Zerrin Studio. So we actually help a lot of ethical brands create content. That includes beautiful campaign shoots. It includes videos. It includes consulting. A lot of that also had to come to a stop because we literally couldn't leave the house. So I ended up doing a lot of home photo shoots and, everything for e-commerce orders I was shipping from home. And we balanced everything and sort of went back to, we were in the middle of a website build also at the time. So we had something really, a website refresh. So we had something that we were kind of solidly getting stuck into every day. And that's just gone live, which is really cool. But yeah, so we were juggling a lot, very aware of what was going on in Singapore and the rest of the world. And at the same time, I think, well, for us, we did a big series of Instagram lives throughout that period to kind of, we called it Real Talk, actually. And we were just basically getting all of our brands and, very interesting people in the industry and even some customers, basically getting them on lives and just real talking basically about what they were going through and what they did as individuals or companies, and revolving around the concepts of sustainability and how things were evolving for them in their unique respective ways. And those are really lovely conversations, I think, both for me as a founder and for them, because it kind of helped to foster that sense of community, that we were all going through it, and that there would be, a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. And that really made me admire, that gave me strength actually, because it really made me kind of admire everyone's tenacity and quick thinking in times of, well, should we use the word unprecedented times? Yeah. The most overused word of 2020. Yeah.
Like it sounds like community and collaboration are kind of keys to like your survival kit. And I think, and similarly, the fact that we have this digital space, it's so wonderful to be able to connect and expand that community around the globe. So that's great advice. I know you have a couple of things coming up for Zerrin. What are some of the things coming up and how can folks engage and participate?
Awesome. So one major thing we have coming up, well, one thing we have done is we just relaunched the Zerrin website. So please head over, seezerrin.com. We've got lots of amazing new content and things that we're rolling out there. With Zerrin, we do an annual pop-up called The Lounge every year. Last year, that took place May to July and in November. So we're actually bringing it back in 3 weeks in Singapore, collaborating with our friends from the Social Space Cafe in Marina One. So we're actually above the cafe. It's a beautiful pop-up experience of ethical, positive impact brands, very fashion, beauty focused. We'll also be hosting small-scale workshops looking at what's happening in terms of COVID rules, as well as a webinar series that we're launching. Lots of digital live streams with brands. It's going to be really awesome. So kind of just doing the same pop-up, which is very intimate and boutique-y, but we're kind of really trying to merge it with the digital side too, and really kind of enable people to engage wherever they are, basically.
Yeah. And you do have a sustainable brand directory. A lot of people ask me about that. So for those interested in building your sustainable wardrobe, you can head over to Zerrin.com to find that guide. Okay, well, thank you so much, Susannah, for joining me on today's episode. And for those of you who have tuned in or who are tuning in, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Grit and Glamour. This is a series that galvanizes and inspires the next generation of fashion change makers. So thank you all for joining. We broadcast every Saturday here on Facebook Live, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If this episode inspired you, do share with a friend. Here's to all the grit behind the glamour. Until next time.